Welcome to the 23rd meeting of Halloween Addicts Anonymous. We're here to deal with our issues regarding Halloween and wanting to have every decoration there is. But this month is Christmas month. This project is called Cookie Nerds. So let's cover base coating first. You don't need to watch me base coat, and so I'm just going to tell you what things were base coated in, and you can take it from there. So the first thing we did was we base coated in our little gingerbreads, and those were done with milk chocolate. It definitely does not have to be opaque. There is a lot of stuff that goes on top of that. So once you get those painted, you can let it dry, sand it lightly, and put on the pattern for the eyes, the mouth, and the little peppermint candy. You want to go ahead and paint the handles on the rolling pin with Irish moss. And the rolling pin itself is painted with almandine. One pair of glasses is painted with lavender, and the other pair of glasses is painted with Irish moss. All your lettering is painted with lamp black. This little heart is painted with country red, and the icing that you're going to put on your little guy is painted with warm white. Now there's 2 large pieces and 4 small pieces of icing. So once you get that all done, then we're ready to go. All right, let's bake some gingerbread. So it's painted in milk chocolate. We are going to stipple all over the gingerbread. You can avoid the eyes if you want, but we're going to stipple all over their little arms and their head with sable brown first. And now we're going to do a series of 3 different colors stippling. So in between, you can just wipe your brush out. You don't need to wash it out and dry it. But let's start with sable brown first. And this is going to go all over. You don't want to make the milk chocolate color disappear. We just want to start adding texture and bringing the highlights up on this guy. So I like to use a Langnickel short round sable brush to stipple with. I use it to dry brush. I use it to smoosh, which is how I build my snowman. But for this piece, we're going to use it to stipple with. So I'm just going to go around and stipple this sable brown all over my little snowman. All over my little gingerbread man. I'm so used to painting snowmen. If you wanted to tape off the rolling pin, that might be a good idea, so you don't have to worry about getting color on your rolling pin. And this is going to dry, and it's not going to look that great, but that's okay. These little gingerbread guys are going through puberty, so they're not going to look good for a while. They're going to look all pimply and blotchy and not really cute at all. But hey, we all have to go through a time when we are not that lovely, right? Mine is usually right in the morning when I first get out of bed. I'm like, yeah, I'm not ready to greet the day yet. So just stipple, stipple, stipple. And I'm just going to go around the eyes. If I get in the eyes, it's okay, because they're going to be based in with a dark enough color that it'll cover it up. So just get some texture on there. So I think you get the idea. I will probably fast forward ginger number 2, because you can always stop your video and finish your stippling on your gingers of sable brown. I'll slow down when I get to the next color. So the sable brown stippling is done. I'm just going to wipe this brush out. And the next layer of color that I'm going to add is honey brown. And I'm just not going to, well, I am going to stipple all over again. And what honey brown is going to do is going to give it a little bit more of that cookie color. You know, that nice golden brown, fresh baked out of the oven cookie color. And this is gonna go all over too. But again, you don't want to totally wipe out that background milk chocolate. So make it light and airy. And again, I think you get the idea of stippling. So I will probably fast forward. All right, so we've got the honey brown stippled all over. Our next layer of color is going to be done with fawn, and we're going to keep this more in the center areas of the arms, the chest, and the head. And so not quite as much. Just wipe that brush out again and pick up a little fawn. So I'm just going to keep this kind of in the center. And this helps to bring out that honey brown color, that lighter cookie color. So this shouldn't take quite as long. I probably won't fast forward through this. They're still looking kind of ugly, though. Better than they did when we first started, but still a little ugly. Okay, oops, not much there, but that'll be okay. Probably going to get covered up by icing. All right, I think we can call this stippling done. You can always go back in. This looks a little bright right now because it's wet, but you can always go in and pop the color up a little more. But I didn't want to bring it all the way up to white because I wanted it to look like a cookie. So you can wash your brush out now. And we are going to float shading around the outside edge of our cookies and above the rolling pin, and we're going to do that with a float of milk chocolate. So you want to make this a nice soft float. So if you like to use bigger brushes, now would be the time. If you don't like to use bigger brushes, now might be the time for you to give it a shot. Okay, so I'm going to corner load into my milk chocolate and blend it out so I get a nice soft float, I hope. I'm going to start at the top of his head and just float down one side and come around and float that one arm. I'm going to go to my other cookie and do the same thing. But I need more paint. So let's do the other side. So I'm going to turn my guy over and come from his underarm and go around this arm all the way around the outside edge. That brings some of the cookie color back into him. The same with the other ginger. All right, now I want to float shading on the gingers next to the rolling pin. So if you have your tape on still, that will make it nice and easy to keep it a nice straight float. All right. So while we let those floats dry, let's go ahead and get out our gingham stencil, or whatever stencil you're going to use. And let's go ahead and stencil on our rolling pin. So we're going to stencil with country red plus a touch of warm white. So let's see, I have both those colors out. I'm going to get out my stencil brush that I like. Let's line this guy up. And this is a repeating pattern, so you don't have to worry about it not fitting all the way across. So I'm going to pick up some country red and then a little warm white and make a lighter pinky kind of color. And I'm just going to go and gently add this gingham check to my rolling pin. And it doesn't have to be all the same color. I mean, it can be lighter in areas and darker in other areas. And don't forget, you have words that go on top of it, letters. So here again, you may get a little bit of a fast forward. Some nice gingham checks on our rolling pin. So now we can go back to our gingerbread. I'm washing out my stencil brush. And my favorite stencil brushes at the moment are Chris Hoy's. And I love the number 4. I use it a lot. So let's go back to our gingerbreads. Our gingerbreads need some nice round cheeks that sit at the top of each of their smiles, and that's going to be done with country red. So let's add some cheeks. I'm going to dry brush them on, and if you don't have a way that you like to dry brush, I do have a video on my YouTube channel that shows you how I like to dry brush. All right, so nice round cheery cheeks. just have to find the top of the other side of the smile. And it's kind of like sits right under the eye. So that's a good place where you can figure out where your cheek goes. Right on top of the end of the smile line and kind of under and outside of the eye. All right, nice cheeks on there. You're going to go ahead and paint in the eyes and line the mouth with lamp black. So just nice ovals for the eyes. Thankfully, I didn't do more than 2 gingerbreads. But I know some of you out there are probably painting more than one of these. All right, now the mouth is going to be lined with lamp black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up in the cheek area. And start on the tip, and then as I get towards the bottom, I flatten that out and then come back up on the tip. And then I always like to go in and add a little set down, kind of a little stirrup, to give a stopping point for those, for that smile. So, up on the tip, inside the cheek, and as you come across the bottom, you flatten that brush out a little bit and then come back up. Especially easy if you put enough paint in your brush. But we're going to come back up to a point inside that other cheek. And I'm going to give it a couple little stirrups. All right. So we are going to let the eyes and the mouth dry before we move on with them. So let's go ahead and get out our Chris's Peppermint Pal stencil. And if you don't have a stencil, you can just paint it in, or if you have a round stencil that you can use for this, that'd be great. But we're going to add the peppermint candy, and we are going to stencil in the circle first. Let me get a little closer. This is a handy little stencil to have because it has several different ways that you can do the candy. So I'm going to go back to my stencil brush. I'm drying it out so I can use it again. And I'm going to stencil the largest circle on this stencil. And I'm just going to stencil it in with warm white. And again, it doesn't have to be completely opaque. And we'll come back in a little bit and add the swirls on it. I can see that my eyes are still a little wet. My eyes and mouth are still a little wet. So I'm going to grab my heart cutout and I'm going to work on it. So it was painted in Country Red, and I'm going to dry brush some highlighting on it with Country Red plus warm white, and then I'm going to pick up some more warm white and dry brush a brighter highlight in the tops. So Country Red plus warm white, that light pink again like we did on the rolling pin. And basically I'm going to get back on camera and I'm going to stencil basically all over this little heart. All right, so now I'm going to pick up some more warm white and I'm going to stencil basically just in the top. So right in here and right in here. All right, and then you can wash your brush out. So with a liner brush, you want to add that little swirl design, the little flowery swirl design. I just wanted to dress it up a little bit. So with your liner brush and thin warm white, you can put the pattern on for it or you can just wing it. I'm going to wing it. I'm going to put a little petal here. It's not a full flower. And another petal. And a third petal. And then I'm going to go to the other side of my heart and add another one of those. Just to dress it up a little bit. And then there are just a couple little swirls that come out. So here, I'm going to put one right here. And then I'm going to put one coming out of this flower. And then I needed to fill up a little space here. So I added one right in there. It's a little bit more swirly. And yours is going to look so much better. All right, we do have to float some shading on that, but we will come back and do that in a little bit. Let's go back and stencil the swirly on our candy. Now, if you'd rather have this kind of candy, that's fine too. You get a pick. And the swirl is just done with straight Country Red. So just get it kind of centered on there. This one you're probably going to be better off pouncing the stencil on because the swirls move if you try to do it the way I usually do it. Okay, so I have a swirl on my peppermint candy. And we have a few things to do to that, so we will come back to it later. We are going to go back to our eyes and face. And the first thing we're going to do is get out some burnt umber. And then we'll back off this guy again a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to line a shadow above each eye and below the mouth with thinned burnt umber. So and usually when I do this, I like to start about halfway down the eye, up on the tip of my brush. I'm using a liner. And then when I get around the top, I flatten it so it gets wider. And then I come back to the tip. So it's like a really wonky crescent stroke. So about halfway down on the tip, flatten around the top, and come back to the tip on the other side. I'll go ahead and do this guy. And all this does is it kind of sets the eyes into the cookie a little bit so that they're not floating on top. It makes them look connected. And then I'm also going to line that shadow under the mouth. And it's basically just the wide part. So I'll start up here on the tip and flatten a little bit as I go under the wide part and then come back up. So tip, flatten, and come back up to tip. Now as long as we're doing this, we might as well line shadow to the left side of the candy too. So to the left side, I'll start at the top of the candy. And the same thing, I'm starting on the tip. I'm going to flatten and then come back up to the tip. So I am going to come back and I'm going to refloat this area right above the rolling pin. I'm going to do that with burnt umber just to darken it and put those gingers behind that rolling pin just a little more. So a nice soft float of burnt umber. All the way across the bottom of those gingers. And that just sets them back a little further. So you're going to need some tropical blue. If you don't have tropical blue, you can use ocean blue. You can use any blue you want. We're just going to give these gingers, this ginger some blue eyes, and this ginger is going to have green eyes. So tropical blue and Irish moss. Obviously you don't need a whole lot. So my ginger on the left, let's work on him first. No, her. It's a her. Sorry. We are going to paint her eyes in with Irish moss. And so this is the way I paint most of the eyes that I paint. They start out just full on lamp black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a crescent shaped stroke of Irish moss in the bottom of her eye. But I want to keep that stroke a little off the edge in the bottom. So I'm going to take my liner brush and I'm going to line the bottom of that stroke first. And then I come back and finish the stroke. I'm going to do the same thing in the other eye. And so this is basically how I do most of the eyes that I paint on my characters. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of warm white on that dirty brush. So I'm going to get a lighter value of Irish moss. And I'm just going to line a highlight through the center of each of those strokes I just painted on there. So let's go over and do our ginger guy. And he's going to get the same thing done, except it's going to be with tropical blue or the blue of your choice. So just the same little crescent shaped stroke in the bottom. And if you want to change their eyes, reverse them, that's fine. They're your gingers. And the same thing goes with this guy. You pick up just a little warm white on your dirty brush to give yourself a lighter value tropical blue. And we just line a little bit of a highlight through the center of those blue strokes. All right. So both of the eyes are going to get a brighter highlight down the center of their strokes with straight warm white. So I'm going to load my liner brush with straight warm white, and I'm just going to kind of tap through the center of that highlighted part. Some warm white highlighting just to bump it up a little bit more. And I'm tapping because I don't want it to be perfect. But if you want yours perfect, that's fine. And then we have some highlight little set downs or strokes if you want, but I just did set downs. And they are going to go in the upper right side of each eye. So just a set down and a set down. And then I go diagonally from that set down and add a smaller set down that straddles the color of the eye and the black of the eye. So just a little thing, and that just gives them cute little eyes. So same thing on the green eyes. And then I'm going to do that straddle across the color and the black. So that little face is done. Let's go back to our peppermint candy, and let's float shading in the left side of the candy with country red first. So on the candy, in the left side, I'm going to float country red. And then in the right side, I'm going to float a highlight of warm white. So I'm going to turn this guy over. And so in the right side, he gets a little highlight float of warm white. So we're going to let that dry. Let's go back to our little heart for right now. And we need to float some shading on this little heart with black plum. So it's going to go across the tops. Just try to make it easy in those two humps. And you are going to try to come down the sides. So just go up the side or down the side, whichever works for you. Fingernails come in handy here because you can hold your part down, or you can tape it to something, and across the bottom. And you can set that little guy aside because we're done with that little heart. You want to get out some deep midnight blue. We'll go back to our little peppermint candy. We're going to float shading again on that left side with some very well blended out deep midnight blue. I want it to be a nice soft float of deep midnight blue. And this just helps to give the candy a little bit more dimension. And the last thing we do to that candy is we give it a highlight stroke of warm white in the right side. Let's set this guy aside for just a minute and get all our icing cutouts out. There's a lot of them. 2 large ones, 4 small ones. And what we're going to do is we are going to dry brush some shading with deep midnight blue in the ends and in the downward curves basically just pick a side of the curve to dry brush some shading in. So deep midnight blue with your dry brush. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, and these are what I consider the downward curves. So I'm just going to dry brush a little deep midnight blue in each of those downward curves, just to give it a little bit more dimension than if you just left it flat white. So let's get over here. Doesn't take very much. Okay. All right, I forgot to do the ends. So we just want to scrub a little deep midnight blue on the ends of these icing pieces too. I'm glad I stopped and looked at that. All right, now on the shorter icing pieces, you want to make sure you have opposites, okay? And let's see. We are going to just dry brush in the top. And I need some more paint in the bottom. It's amazing what just a little touch of color will do. And then what I want to do is I want to dry brush in this little area here, this little V, just on one side. I can set those aside. Again, on the ones that are splat across the bottom, you want to dry brush in the top. You want to make sure you have opposites. Top and bottom. And then also in this little V area. All right, we can put our little icing things away. So let's get out our green glasses. We are going to dry brush highlighting on these glasses with Irish Moss plus warm white. And the dry brushing is basically going to go all over. You just want to lighten those up a little bit, but not wash out the Irish Moss altogether. All right, and you were probably wondering why I suggested a stripe stencil when you didn't see any stripes on this really. What I do with the stripe stencil just makes it really easy to line those stripes. So there are some country red stripes, thin stripes on the glasses. Now if you wanted to stencil and make them bigger stripes, you could. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of center a stripe on the center of the glasses. And I'm going to take my liner brush and some thinned country red. I'm going to hold this down. And I'm just going to use that stencil as a guide to line those stripes. That way it's easy to get them lined up top and bottom. But like I said, if you want to stencil actual fat stripes, please be my guest. That stripe got a little fat. I guess I can't say that when I'm doing thin stripes. Okay, And now I'm going to go do this other side somehow. But it makes it really easy to line those stripes up. Just a few more stripes. All right, so now we have thin country red stripes on our green glasses. So now we are going to get out some black forest green, and we are going to float some shading on our glasses. It's going to go along the bottom edge, including this little nose piece, across the top, and where the top of the frame joins the curved part of the frame. So just a few places. And you want to remember this because the same thing's going to happen to the purple one. So I'll go across the top, and this is with black forest green, just to float. I'm going to go around the bottom, it kind of turns the whole thing green, darker green. That's okay, it looks cool. I'm going to turn this over so I can get the other side. And then I want to touch just a little float where the top part of the frame, so you go from this little point up there. That point up to there. All right. We are going to line some brighter highlights with our liner brush and warm white, thinned warm white. You want to keep these pretty thin. So I lined right where the nose piece goes. Just a couple of little lines. I did the same on the outside edge here, although it's shorter. And then I also did across the top. A lot of little work for this pair of glasses. So there are dots on either side of the top of the frame, and those are painted with tropical blue plus warm white. So we're pulling in tropical blue again. And I'm just going to paint some little circles. They'll dry much faster now. Just right in the, where you would have decorations on your frame usually. Which reminds me, I need to get my eyes tested. All right, a couple of dots with tropical blue plus warm white. And we are going to line a shadow next to those dots, inside edges, with our liner brush and some thinned black forest green. So I'm just gonna, I need to get a point. All right, so I'm just gonna line on the green part next to the blue dot on the inside edge on both sides, just to make that stand out a little bit more. And then there is a highlight dot on each of those little blue dots. It's just kind of top center, and that's with warm white. All right, so we can set this pair of green glasses aside, and we'll get to work on our purple glasses. So in much the same way, you're going to dry brush highlighting all over these glasses with lavender plus warm white. So I'm just going to pick up some lavender on my dry brush and then pick up some warm white, give myself a lighter value of lavender. And I'm just going to dry brush this all over these purple frames. All right. Now, drywall joint tape is the tape with the little tiny holes. You can get it at Lowe's. Sometimes out here in Oklahoma, they don't carry it in the store, so I had to order it online. If you order it, though, you're going to get yourself a roll of a lot of this stuff. So you only need a little piece. So I do sell it in smaller sections on my website. If you haven't used it before, if you've taken a class from me where we used it, you got a piece that'll last you a long time. As you can see, there's several different colors on this piece. So we are going to stencil the lower half of these glasses with lavender plus warm white. I want it just a hair lighter than that dry brush that you put on. So, and they don't have to line up. If you want them to line up, that's fine, but they don't have to. So I'm just going to dry brush some lavender plus warm white. In the bottom half. And then I'm going to wipe out my brush a little bit and pick up more warm white. And I'm going to dry brush the stencil that top of the glasses with the lighter, even lighter purple. So kind of an ombre frame in a sense. So we're going to float shading on the glasses, and this is basically going to go in all the same places that the shading went on the green glasses, but you're going to do it with Diox purple. So again, nice soft float of dioxazine purple. I'm going to go across the top. I'm going to go in the bottom. On both sides. So I'm going to turn this guy around. And then I also want to do that little float to separate the top of the frame from the bottom of the frame. And we also line the brighter highlights with thinned warm white, same places. I'm going to do littler ones on the outside, a little bit larger ones in the nose area, and then a long one across the top. And the dots on this frame, I did mine with Country Red. If you want to do yours a different color, that's fine. But I decided Country Red would work. So just a nice little dot of country red. We're going to line that shadow on the frame to the inside of the dot. So dioxazine purple, just your liner brush, just line a little shadow to set those dots off of the frame a little bit. And then they have a warm white highlight in each dot. So, purple frame's done. Let's go back to our larger piece. And let me back off a little bit. Oops, not quite that much. I guess I could do one side. We're going to work on these handles. I need to move my icing and my glasses out of the way. So we're going to work on the handles. They're both going to get the same treatment, both sides. So you're going to dry brush highlighting on the handles with Irish moss plus warm white. And that's basically going to go all over the handle. Okay, I'll go over here and do the other one. And then I'm just going to pick up some more warm white so I get an even lighter value of the green. And I'm going to dry brush, brighter highlighting, but this is just going to stay in the top area more. Okay. We're going to float shading, and that's going to go next to the light part of the rolling pin and along the bottom edge. And that's going to be done with black forest green. Okay, so a nice soft float of black forest green on the handle next to the rolling pin. And you can just kind of walk the color around, turn that corner, and go along the bottom edge, the bottom half. I'm going to soften that a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to turn my guy over so it's a little easier. So I'm going to go right next to the rolling pin. And then I'm also going to come around that corner and float the lower half. Okay. So we can call the handles done. We're going to come to our rolling pin, so I will back off a little bit. And what I want you to do is I want you to dry brush through the center of this rolling pin with warm white. And you just want to lighten up that center where the lettering is going to go. Doesn't have to be pretty. Pretty would be nice, but it doesn't have to be. And it's going to take a little bit of reloading to get all the way across that rolling pin. I'm just going to lighten this up where the lettering is going to go. I think we might get it this time. I scrub a little harder. Didn't quite make it. Okay, so we've lightened up that center. You can wash your dry brush out. And what we're going to do is we're going to float shading around all four sides with burnt umber. Nice soft float of burnt umber. A little too much water in my brush, but we'll make it work. Okay. So I'm going to come around this corner, go all the way across the bottom. I'm going to come up the other side and then go across the top. So just a quick, soft float of burnt umber. And what's nice is that burnt umber shading on your gingerbread makes it a little easier if you don't stay quite on the rolling pin. All right. So now we just have the lettering left to do, and then we can glue our little guy together and add our beaded wire hanger, and we'll be done. So our lettering has been painted with lamp black. So let's get all of our lettering out here. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to dry brush highlighting on the lettering with tropical blue plus warm white. Whatever blue you used, that's what you want to use. My directions say to dry brush all over, so I guess I'll dry brush all over. Just treat each letter individually. Just dry brush all over the letter with that tropical blue, warm white mix. Let's see, need to mix a little bit more. Just adds a little interest to that lettering. And don't forget, our 5 cents gets it too. Let me just give you 5 cents worth of my advice. Just keep painting. dry brush a little bit brighter highlight just in the top of the letters, and that's going to be with straight warm white. Well, you can use your dirty brush. So the top of half of each letter is going to get a brighter dry brush on it. Those are looking good. And then if that wasn't enough, we're going to go ahead and float some lamp black in the bottom half of each letter. So I'm just going to take and do a quick little float of lamp black in the bottom. So on your K, you can walk it up a little bit. O's are easy. Start halfway up the side and go around and up the other side. Don't have to be real careful. And then, just to add a little bit more interest to this lettering, and I noticed I didn't put it in the directions, but it's definitely in the picture. I'm just going to spatter them kind of lightly with warm white. Doesn't take a lot of spatters, but just a little bit of warm white. Okay, my friends, I hope there's more than one person watching. So, lettering's done, everything else is done. What we're going to want to do next is to glue our pieces together. So I'm going to grab my glue and I'll be back. Okay, so you just want to glue your things together. What I would suggest is that you glue the glasses on the face first before you glue this icing across the top. That way you, or just lay it out. You can kind of tell, leave yourself room for this icing. And then everything gets glued in place. The ones with the straight, of course, go in the center. And then the lettering. You can sign it. Add your beads on your wire hanger. And those are available from my website, or if you want to buy yourself 100 of them, you can get them on Amazon. And you're done. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you next month when we return to actual Halloween for Halloween Addicts Anonymous.